All right. Oh, look at my voice. It's all clean, beautiful, right? I thought that it's like not good to see good, but no, it's just a joke. Never mind. All right, everyone, welcome to the product and data and AI real world stories. We're gonna learn a bunch of things today. We have great folks with here with us today from Jacksonville, and they will share expertise like skills, lessons learned, wins and fails, everything about how to deploy like AI-driven solutions and products. So I'm so excited for today. So, but before we begin, look at this venue. Amazing, right? Isn't it? All right, wow. So cool. So thanks, Andy, W, Marriott. So who is like working for Marriott here? Okay. We have like 300 people. Awesome. Okay, cool. So my name is Sullivan. If you haven't met yet, it's nice to meet you. So I'm one of the members here in the ProductTank organization team, and I'm gonna be your host for the next, I don't know, 2 minutes, I guess. Let's see how it goes. All right, so let's move to the next slide. And who is here for the first time? All right, good. Yeah, welcome. We have a full house, and yeah, you are super welcome here. If you don't know about the ProductTank mission or ProductTank goal, we want to like foster collaboration and drive innovation and excellence inside local communities. So it's a great time, to network, share your knowledge, and I'm going to talk about this later. But yeah, thank you so much. Okay, and another thing. Now, a word from our sponsor, Integris, that is really helping us here. I don't know if I got it right, how to pronounce it.
You did, Integris.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have like a little bit of accent, but no one can like spot that, I'm pretty sure. All right. All right, so please, Lisa, join us.
Thank you. Oh my goodness, it's amazing. I've been here doing ProductTank for over 1.5 years now, and we've been here where there's 10 people, where there's 20 people, but not this many people. So it's wonderful to see all of you, and love to thank Marriott Vacations for giving us this facility to use tonight. It's beautiful. My name is Melissa Weichel. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Integris Group. We're an IT servicing company. Data is really our sweet spot. We do a lot of many things, but data is one of those things that we do well. So we were really grateful when Curtis called me and was like, would you like to sponsor tonight? ProductTank isn't just about the technology for us, it's really about the people. At the end of the day, at Integris and myself, passionate about product. People make great companies, people make great products. And I think a lot of decisions are made in the boardroom, but great ideas are made at events like this. When we get the community together, when we get other people, problem solvers, and have those ideas and inspired. I was telling my team the other day, I said, I think the best call to action button is that skip ad. And I'm pretty sure that wasn't invented in a boardroom. I'm sure that was done at a cocktail napkin or somewhere like this. So I hope you enjoyed tonight. We brought food, so if you haven't made a plate, please eat, and welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we have like great content, great food, great venue, great friends, great networking, great jokes. No, I don't have like great jokes. All right, if you don't know about ProductTank, but we are like more than 200 groups around the world. And just here in Orlando, we have more than 1,300 members, so which is so cool. We are like growing fast and faster. And like some pictures, just like to, like images is better than words. Is that right? All right, cool. Oh, this is São Paulo, this is Dubai. Yeah, Dubai is a great one, we should like take one down. Los Angeles. And we have Mexico City as well, good place as well. All right, cool. So if you want to be involved, we have like some ways. You can speak at a product tank, you can host or sponsor a product tank, you can appear on a Mind the Product podcast and attend an MTP conference. So just let us know who is like a product tank organization team member. Raise your hand.
Martin.
Martin?
Him.
Yeah, it's time to raise your hand. Yeah, so yeah, just like talk to us and then we can figure out how you can be involved. So we can be so cool to have you with us. All right, without further ado, let me call Curtis.
All right.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. We should also welcome our YouTube friends. Hello, YouTube. This is being streamed live. Yes. So I want to just a couple announcements, and we're going to do a quick poll. If you haven't heard, World Product Day comes up yet again. Every year we do this, and this year it lands on May 21st. So look for that event on our website coming soon. Next slide. Also want to highlight a couple of cool local groups. These are friends of ProductTank Orlando. Anyone here from Startup Week in Orlando tonight? Anyone representing? Beth? Stand up, Beth. What are you doing, Beth? Are you going to be a coach?
No, I'm just going to be a volunteer.
You can be a volunteer. Awesome.
If you would like to participate with me as a volunteer, there will be an opportunity for you.
So there's more volunteer opportunities available for Startup Week in Orlando. Very great event hosted by Orlando Innovation League. And then the other group we want to mention, anyone from DOUX, Downtown Orlando. Yeah, Downtown Orlando. Jason, do you have an event coming up?
Yeah, April 17th on Thursday, we'll have John Murray, one of the UCF professors from Downtown Orlando UX campus, is going to be doing a student portfolio review. So we'll be meeting at the Downtown Orlando UX campus. If you want to hear about it, just sign up on the meetup page for it.
You have a meetup page. Great. Perfect. Thank you. All right. And yes, we have. Oh, there was also some news. I wanted to see if anyone had caught this news yet. Did you hear about Salesforce? You know, they own Slack. They just introduced Ghost Mode today. You know about Ghost Mode? You caught it, right? It's wild. It's like, we all get a little over inundated with messages. Wouldn't it be nice if AI could just sort of respond on our behalf? Just say, yes, I'll get back to you, Mary and Beth. I got this. Don't worry. Awesome. They introduced Ghost Mode. Is this a feature we've been waiting for? Powerful use of AI. April Fools! Got you! We had to do one April Fool's joke, right? All right. Now we'll get on to the poll. So we use this tool called Butter, and we're going to just give you a little place to log in. So there's a link. Hit that. Join. Oh. Yeah. Yes. So if you would do this on a phone or a laptop, join.butter.us. Join.butter.us. You'll just put in those digits, and we want to get some data in the room. We just have 2 quick poll questions for you guys. If it asks you for a name, just put in initials. You don't have to even identify. Okay. All right. You getting there? So I'm going to put up the first poll. Here's the first question. Okay, sorry. All right. There's the digits. Can you read it all the way in the back? 33894372. And the URL is join.butter.us. Everybody good? No? Oh.
Their site is a little buggy.
Okay, good to know, good to know. Is anybody on this site yet? It's slow. Dave Atkins, what's going on?
Can you do the numbers just one more time?
Okay, last time for the numbers. 3889-4372. Sounds like I'm about to give out an award. 3889-4372. All right, so here's the question. Will you clone yourself before you leave your mortal coil? I actually put this up because I saw something actually kind of touching. It was a documentary about a father who had cancer, and he created a digital, instantiation, if you will, for a legacy for his family, and his son, 7 or 8 years old, can interact with his dad. So it's kind of an interesting thought. So a range of opinions like we get across AI, right? But the serious question, the one that we really want to tee up right now and get into the room, is your burning questions for tonight. We've got some great speakers here all the way down from Jacksonville. So give them a little heads up about what you're interested in this evening. What would you like to hear about? Here it comes. Got a lot of typing going on. Here we go. Some great implementations of AI, which is not Gen AI. I think you guys can handle that. That's in your sweet spot. Okay. AI adoption pacing. What outcomes come from your most successful implementation of AI? Optimizing AI for workplace efficiencies. Where are we at in the Gen AI adoption curve? What's the best platform to build agents? I thought you guys would have a lot of questions. When will I be subjugated by my AI overlords? What are currently the best AI tools to help improve cross-functional communication? The most used tools, prominent uses, security concerns. You ever heard these questions, guys? They ever come up with your clients? Yeah. Good AI assistance, whatever good might mean. Which AI stock should we invest in? You want to touch that? That'll be interesting. And our speakers wanted me to say that they're very open to interruptions. So we will keep the microphone moving around. Well, if we get it around the room, we will, but you might just have to repeat the question. But we definitely want this to be interactive. So I'm going to park the poll. I'll let you bring it back to slides. Perfect, thank you. So that leads us to really why we're all here. So I can definitely say you're in for a treat. I got a little sneak peek, and so did Martin. He and I drove up to Jacksonville a couple months ago, and this group was presenting at ProductTank Jacksonville. And what I loved so much about it was how honest and frank and open they were about the real life, real world, fails and wins. It's not all a win. And they were just super transparent about that. And I said, guys, could you bring that back? Could you bring it to Orlando? And thankfully they said, yeah. So we were so lucky to have Jennifer Bradshaw, one of the key PMs leading the product management at NLP Logix, and 2 of their AI solutions engineers and architects. So I'm just going to ask Jennifer, Ben, and Katie, come on up. Please welcome NLP Logix.
Thank you very much for hosting us tonight. As Curtis mentioned, I'm Jen. That's Katie, and that's Ben. We really want this to be interactive. We're not here to just talk at you. We are here to help educate and demystify whatever we can. Curtis, you're touching buttons.
Yes, this is the one I want. Oh, I'm sorry, you do need, sorry. Let me try, if I can do this.
Okay.
All right,
So-
there you go.
Thank you.
Sorry.
It's okay. So we have very minimalist slides. They are used to just put a thought in your head. You don't need us to read to you. We are just engaging in conversation. So kind of forget that the slides exist and just interact with us. Ben and Katie have a lot of things to say. They have been with NLP Logix from the very beginning. Ben was employee number 1, Katie was employee number 2. So they've grown this organization over the past almost 14 years now. We have seen a lot. People didn't even know what NLP stood for back in the day. Now all of a sudden, we're like prom queens. It's pretty cool. But we hear a lot from organizations, and you guys are gonna have to speak out of that. And one of the things that we hear a lot is, what AI do I need? I wanna use generative AI. How do we use generative AI? That literally the first conversation we'll have with clients. And while we can appreciate the enthusiasm, first it'd be really helpful to know, what are you trying to achieve? What problems exist that you're trying to solve? Ben and Katie, please enlighten us.
So I'm gonna start with a question, and it's how many of you guys have had somebody come to you and say, we need a chatbot? So I feel like it's every phone call I get on is, we need a chatbot. So, okay, well, what do you want the chatbot to do? They'll say, oh, I need to forecast my sales in the next year. Well, maybe you don't need a chatbot. Maybe we need something different. And it really is this foundation of, having this discovery mindset, having that focus on product, where it is, how do I use AI in a way that's gonna drive actual business value? So sitting down and figuring out not what AI should I be using, but what problem am I trying to solve? And if you can figure out what problem you're trying to solve, what we enjoy doing, Ben and I at least, can we solve that problem with AI? So if you can use AI to solve that problem, awesome, cool. Not every problem needs AI in the first place. There's a lot of cases where you really don't need it. So, a big focus for us has been, what are you actually trying to do, and can we use AI to solve that? So before we get anywhere with writing code or any of that, it is, what are you trying to solve?
Something that I'll add to that is, when you look at the recent advertisements of all the promises of AI and what it's going to do for your business, frequently the way that it's pitched is, 30% more efficient, 50% faster. And they say these as generic aggregate numbers without any clue about how your business works and what the data is that pours through your business and the level of expertise that's necessary in order to draw conclusions. And so normally the reason why businesses come and say, we need a chatbot or we need AI, is because they're desperate to realize that 30% savings because they think everybody else is, and so they don't want to be behind. And you need to start with this understanding that that's marketing by people who want you to feel that way. And you need to start with the perspective of, where are my pain points? Do those pain points exist in terms of lots of manual human labor, or do they exist because of time? Do they exist because of process? And start with those conversations. If you start with the end goal in mind of % savings, you're not going to get there.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick on Ben real quick, because, we've known each other forever. So Ben had a client at one point that came and said, I need a neural network, because that's what was in the news. So before it was chatbots, it was neural networks or deep learning. And then before that, it was machine learning. It was just whatever is the key thing that's in the news. And we had a client come and say, I need a neural network. And it took a lot of maturing of our organization to say, no, it's really something where, I have clients, especially if you're small, if you're a startup, we were 5 people sitting around one table. And if somebody comes and says, I need a neural network, well, okay, we're gonna figure out how to make that neural network for you. But at the end of the day, it's not driving value for the customer. And if we don't solve a problem for the customer, then we're gonna leave. Well, they're gonna leave us. So, we wanna be able to stick around, and what that means is being able to say no sometimes. It has to be sort of a little bit more forceful, and it takes a lot of maturing as an organization to be able to say, sorry, I'm not gonna do that for you.
How many people have heard
the next phrase is up here, total cost of ownership.
Oh.
The product people, I should see more hands. I really should. Okay, how many people understand what total cost of ownership means when it comes to implementing and productionalizing AI solutions? Show of hands. Right. You just heard Ben and Katie talk about clients coming to us asking for very specific solutions, not coming to us with problems. Obviously, these clients don't understand total cost of ownership. So they have these big grand visions of the things that they want to achieve, specific solutions, but yet they really have no idea what the cost is. And we're now starting to get clients coming to us and say, we may have done something. We implemented this thing, and now we have an Azure bill that's like 200 grand a month. What do we do? Oops. Ben and Katie?
So I think there's a couple places that I want to go talking about total cost of ownership. One is understanding the compute costs. A lot of things, when you talk about things like vision models, you're using GPU compute, like it gets expensive fast. And you need to just be aware of that. The other side of it is if you think about traditional software development, think about building a website where I'm going to put a thing that says, if you click on this button, then it's going to show a picture of a cat. If I come back in 50 years, as long as I've got a GUI to compile that thing, if I click on that button, I'm going to see a picture of a cat. Nothing has changed. It's code, and the code directs what happens in the UI. At the end of the day with AI, there's multiple pieces. So you have code, you have a model, and you have data that's going into it, and that data changes. So we do a lot of work in debt collection. So I'm gonna ask, what do you guys think the relationship is between unemployment rates and the collectability of debt?
Strong.
Okay, so high unemployment means you probably can't collect that debt, right? What about in 2020, when people were all of a sudden unemployed, there were stipends going out, people who were furloughed all of a sudden had more money than they had before and were paying their bills. So that input data changed, and that changes the output of the model. It's not click a button and see a cat. It's put in the data and we'll see what happens. It's living, breathing code, and you have to monitor it every month. You can't just set it and forget it. If you were talking about the total cost of AI ownership, you have to maintain it as well. It's something that you're gonna have to constantly be thinking about and monitoring the health of.
A perspective that I'll give here is that if you think about traditional software development and you think about AI, there's sort of this inverse relationship where traditional software development, you pay a lot up front in order to build the thing. And then once the thing is built, then there's reusability, and that's where you get your value. A lot of the times with AI, if you need to answer the question on a handful of examples, it's pretty cheap because you can take your handful of examples, run it through a process, get your great answer, and it feels great. But then as your solution gets more popularity, which is obviously what you're looking for, and people are using it more often, then you get this inverse relationship where that cost really starts piling up because of the frequency of the calls that you're asking. And if you're doing it at scale, you have to realize that you're actually asking the same questions in repetition when you're doing it at scale. And when you get to the point where you're asking the same question in repetition, some of these custom generative solutions aren't actually what you want. Because when you're asking the same question 10,000 times a day, you want your own custom model that it doesn't have to think about the universe of topics to answer your question. You want something that's targeted. And what you'll find when you're staring at Azure bills is the difference between a targeted model and a generalist model is maybe 10x. And it's the difference between something that can make it in production and actually give you that ROI you're looking for versus something that looks really cool during a demo and doesn't actually make it.
Okay, so the next thing, after we get through the money conversation with our clients, then we stumble onto, but I really need to do something progressive.
It needs to wow the board. We're gonna be going for funding, we need to do something that can, it doesn't have to be totally real. It's just gotta be shiny. Can you have a unicorn on the screen that can predict my horoscope for the next 7 days and tell me everything that I need to do and eat and my sleep pattern for the week? No, can you just stop? What is the business value? What are you trying to achieve? What's gonna impress your board is when you actually showcase how you're gonna make money or how you're gonna save money. It really comes down to one side of the same coin.
So we're not of the opinion that the wow is a bad thing. The wow is how you get buy-in, it's how you get funding, it's how you get people to be excited about your project. But the wow is also very expensive and it doesn't have this return value to it. So I remember very distinctly a solution that I helped a client build. And we built it for the wow factor. It had a picture of the United States on it. It had these little dots that gave a lot of detail about how much you would pay for different work. If I needed a tax accountant in some city in Kansas, how much would I pay for it? And it was this amazing looking image. And I remember it had the wow factor. And we put it into production and we watched the users. And everyone made it to the page really fast. And everybody stayed there for about 10 minutes. And then never came again. And the reason why is because it answered all the questions they needed in that one visit. Why do you need to go back the next day and recheck this information? And so it had the wow, but it didn't have the longevity. And one of the takeaways is the wow deserves to be in a demo. It deserves to be in a description of what's possible, but it's not where you're investing your development effort. Where you invest your development effort is where there's a really big price tag. And you need to connect that price tag to money coming back, to ROI. And yes, the wow is a good marketing thing. You can connect it to a potential new lead, a potential new deal, a potential new work stream, but that is not concrete. That doesn't pass the sniff test to the finance department, and that means you're not in an active project in a year.
So I'm gonna take a slight detour and then come back to the question, and it's the wow versus the boring, I think is a really good point to talk about. One of our co-founders did something really amazing, I think it was 2016 or 2017. There's a contest called Chameleon that they do every year, it's a data science contest, and he was the 4th place. So he was the only non-academic institution. It was MIT, Harvard, and then, a couple other schools, and then our co-founder, where it was the first time that the machines beat the doctors. So it was identifying breast cancer on a slide. And if you think about 2016, 2017, nobody's willing to take the risk on AI as your doctor. Because at the end of the day, even if it's great, when it's wrong, who are you gonna sue? Who's the responsible party when it's wrong? So it wasn't the time for that. And we had a gentleman who we still work with to this day who called us and said, if you can find breast cancer on a slide, I bet you can find a stamp on a page. And what he needed to do was process millions of documents a month that were getting scanned in and capture the data off them. And I can't think of a sexier use case of solving breast cancer and a less sexy thing of capturing data off a page. But at the end of the day, 1 million pages going through a month is where the money is. But then if we go back to the original statement as well, where data, and data is the value. Every single organization that is generating data, and I know it's so cliche to say, it's like the data is the new oil, or it was all over the place of how important data was, and it really is. So I work with a client that does recruiting. So they help recruiters they've got a bank of 10 million resumes, and you go and you can put in a job description and it's gonna match to identify who is the best fit for this candidate, or for this job. So it's gonna bring back a list of people. They do, typically direct sourcing. So they're gonna do an outreach campaign with these people. And it's a really cool project. And we built this in 2017. And we built it using a technology called Word2Vec. Word2Vec, 1980s? I think it's 80s. Old technology. If I compare it today, it beats OpenAI's embeddings. It beats the BERT embeddings. It beats modern BERT, which is like the most recent iteration of what Google sort of started this whole transformer thing with. And it beats Quen, which is the DeepSeek, other side of the world, machine learning that we're talking about. But it beats all of those in performance. And when I looked at the speed, it is, I'm not joking here, but you compare it to OpenAI, 1,767 times faster in generating a response, because it's super fast. It's old technology. It doesn't have to be this complicated. And the difference is, instead of something that is built on the entire universe of possible knowledge, it's built on resumes. It's only using things in their industry. At the end of the day, it's amazing what OpenAI can do. It's so incredible. And for me as a person to have a conversation with this thing and to know every topic I want to know about, that's great. But when I'm trying to place a person with a job, I don't really care about the plot of the movie Jaws. It doesn't matter. So, it's at the end of the day, training a model that's custom on your own data is almost always going to be a benefit. It's almost always going to be great. Even if you're using older technology, it doesn't have to be the shiniest, newest thing. It has to be the thing that makes business sense.
One thing to add there is what Katie said with your own custom model is probably going to outperform. Let's pretend for a second it's not. You still need a very systematic way of reaching that conclusion. So that way you're going to be able to say, and here's a scenario where it doesn't outperform, and therefore we need to use this thing. If you're not able to really scientifically draw that conclusion, then you're going to be living in this awkward world where you don't know whether or not to use the thing that's 1,000 times slower and vastly more expensive.
Quick recap. We just threw a lot at you guys, and I do want to make sure that if anybody has any questions, we're starting to see some hands pop up, and I will force questions out of you because we saw you had them, so I know they're out there. So some of the things that we're talking about, as product people, we are really excited about the solution. Yes, it's fun to discover what the pain points are. We love a good problem, but I think what we really like even more is being able to solve the problem. It is so important as a product manager to not dive into necessarily the latest and greatest solution. That's not your job as a product manager. You gotta trust your smart technical people who spend their life digging in. Do you know what Katie does for fun on the weekends? I promise you, it's not doing what us product people do. We might be going kayaking, or we might be going to the movies. Katie is finding a way to geek out, and she is combing Reddit for something. She's trying to debunk some sort of myth. I assure you, Ben's the same thing. Ben's building agents on his own to help with recipes. They are spending their day, laugh that it's true, and I want it. But they spend their day and they eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff. It is cool to dabble, and while we are learning a lot by leveraging the ChatGPTs of the world, you're not a data scientist. You didn't go to school necessarily for statistics. You don't know all of the old stuff, the classic AI that will actually be the very good first step and a foundation to solving a big enterprise company's problems. So when you are pitching to your board, to your executives, to tell them why you need to bring AI into your product strategy, don't pitch the solution. You need to tell a story. And you need to tell the story of what problem are you solving. You have to know what is important to your CEO and to his or her boss as well. What problems are they really trying to solve? And again, it always comes down to, you want to make money or you want to save money. You want to optimize your workforce. You want to make people more efficient. You want to upskill. This is what everyone's saying now in the new age of this type of technology. How do you tell that story so it's impactful and meaningful for your company? And how are you going to achieve it? No one has any clue
how to actually put this type of stuff into production. Hell, no one even knows how to gather requirements for it, because it's not like you're gonna sit there and go, okay, what do you want?
Like you're gonna take
An order, you're not here to take orders, you're not, as a product person, you're not supposed to take orders to begin with. And you specifically cannot take orders. If you're working with a client and you're building something on their behalf, that might be part of the audience in this room, you're not gonna ask them, what do you want? Again, we're coming back to the funky chatbot who can spit out the unicorn that can give you a horoscope for the next week. You wanna be able to define real world problems and real world outcomes. Don't forget that, and don't get sidetracked by the cool tech. Curtis?
I have a question.
Yes.
I get save time, save money, of course, right? Save money. Any other value possible? I mean, isn't there a risk, I'll just push back gently, isn't there a risk to focusing on saving time on an existing business process when maybe we shouldn't even be doing that business process anymore? Could we go there?
Didn't even pay you to say that. Okay, so Curtis just brought up, maybe it's not about necessarily saving time, saving money, we need to optimize this business process. Maybe the business process shouldn't exist. Oh, you guys gotta be dying to talk about this, because one of the things that we say a lot within the four walls of our company is, please don't automate a bad process.
So I first got to defend myself and Ben, where I might do a little bit of nerding out on the weekend, but maybe that nerding out is around sports. But no, I think it really is, it's important to figure out what is the problem we're trying to solve. It's what we started with, and there's a reason that we started with that as a point. I think it is the most important thing, and I think we're in a room of mostly product folks, and NLP, we were small, we were a startup, and we got our first operations person in 2019. So we went 6 years where I had some clients, Ben had some clients, some other people had some clients, and I was the product manager and the product owner and doing all of that stuff and trying to manage the project as well. And then these people came in and they were like, we're gonna do some of this. And I'm going, yeah, you're not. Like, we don't want you guys here. We got this. And it really was, it takes a lot to learn, because I'm gonna pick on both of us here, where I feel like these are two professions of, you might get a little bit of the prima donnas. You might get a little bit of a I wanna solve the problem. You are not in product management because you don't wanna solve problems. I'm not in AI because I don't want to solve problems. What we have to do is figure out the right language between each other so that we can solve problems. And, Jen can testify, we butted heads quite a bit, but, it took time to figure out. And part of that was figuring out that my favorite meetings of the week are when Jen and I go and do discovery together, where we go and we sit down with a client, and Jen knows how to get them to start spilling their secrets. I don't know how product managers do it, but apparently you're just really good at getting people to talk. And then I get to hear those things and go, is this what you're actually saying? If we could do this way, could that actually solve your problem? If we could eliminate, we're working with somebody right now that wants to, you've got 3 different people entering data, and we're going, well, what if we just didn't enter the data? What if we just went around it and did something different? And that meeting wouldn't have happened the same way without having this sort of product and AI working together, where, Jen and her team can elicit, you've got to get people to spill their secrets. And then you've got to get somebody, and honestly, I wish I could say that Ben and I are magic and we're just the best people ever, but really, we've just done this for a long time. We're 12, 13 years of building AI models, and I messed up. Going back, there's plenty of places where I look back and go, man, I wish I would have done that differently. But it's not something that you learn in school. It's something that you genuinely have to sort of build AI models and go, yeah, I know that's not gonna work. And, I'm really proud of our company, where I put these numbers together yesterday because somebody was asking for them. We start with POCs on 70% of our projects. If we start with a POC, 65% of the time that goes to production. And if it goes to production, they stay in production about 90% of the time. But that 65% number, the reason that number is high, of going from a POC to a production model, is because we've had plenty of time to fail and we've learned, okay, you don't do that. And you have to, again, go back to, you have to be able to say no, and you have to be able to reframe the problem and say, no, but, I can't do that, but I can do this. And I think that's hugely important for us to be able to do.
So to this specific thing that I think you were getting at with the process change first kind of a thing, I had a big personal revelation about, I guess at this point it was about 7 or 8 months ago, that, I came into this world, into the tech world from data science, and I thought that, data science invented a whole lot of these problems and solutions. And I was meeting with a client, actually, you guys were both there too, and the client listened to everything that we talked about and he said, well, aren't you guys just sort of pitching Lean Six Sigma, right? And pretty much what he was talking about, because it was like a manufacturing problem, is this concept of process first. Because if we build the best machine learning algorithm in the world that predicts some occurrence, and you, company, are unwilling to change your process, then we're not doing anything, right? It's not a magic money box that's spitting you out. It's like a recommendation machine, and you need to be willing to follow its recommendations, or else nothing's going to happen. And so one of the things that we like to experiment with, and we're getting a little bit more bullish about this, is if you can hear the process, and if you can recommend the new process, and the new process on day one is 100% manual, then we've done nothing that uses the word AI. It's just this Lean Six Sigma kind of concept. And if you can adopt to that new process and you break even, you're not any more efficient, you just adopted a process that's conducive for AI and automation, then I consider that a huge win. That's almost more difficult than the technology that gets layered on afterwards. Because adopting the new process means you're willing to accept giving up some degree of control. You're willing to accept that you're not the expert with the secret information. And when a company is in that coachable moment, that means good things are going to happen. And there have been a lot of very good models that failed to get operational adoption that we just had to put on a shelf. And we could tell you stories about them every year, about ones that we just had to put on the shelf. And so from our perspective now, process first, and I don't even want to talk to you about what fancy model can solve your problem, because if I can make some stupid statement that says, hey, I can tell you when the most common thing is going to happen. Just one of these simple if-then type of statements that gives you a little bit of an edge in logic on an entirely manual process, and you're not willing to take that small win and use that to learn from, then that means you're not going to adopt the new system. And it probably means that the machine learning project isn't going to go anywhere.
Can I add one more thing? So we talked about 2 of the 3 things that I think make AI projects not get adopted. So not being process driven, not having an actual solution, just building AI for the sake of AI is one of them. The other, sometimes the model just doesn't work. Sometimes you're just not signaling the data and that doesn't work. And then I think there's this third one that sort of leads into what Ben was saying, which is if it doesn't get adopted, it will not live. So we have to figure out how to get adoption to happen. And in a lot of the cases that we're talking about, we are talking about a really scary thing. If you read the news about AI, it is one of 2 things. AI is going to save the world. It's going to change the world. See articles that are like, AI is going to help you find a girlfriend. Like, that's great. Okay, sure. But it's either that or AI is taking your job. And it is a fear that people have that AI is taking your job. And I mean, you guys use things like ChatGPT. It's not there yet. We're nowhere near the taking your job thing. It might change some jobs. It might change the way things are done. But when we talk about doing discovery, if you're doing discovery with the CEO, you're doing discovery wrong. At the end of the day, when you're talking about AI, and I have this really scary thing where I'm coming to try and automate some process, and somebody's gonna feel like their job is on the line, they're never gonna adopt that solution. They're gonna find every way to say that solution sucks. And what you can do is when we're doing discovery, bring those people in, bring the end users in and say, what if we could do this? Would this make your job easier? Because at the end of the day, it's never gonna be perfect. You're still gonna have to check it. But if you bring those people in from the very beginning and you have the end users buy in, instead of having somebody that is afraid, that thinks your thing is gonna take your job and doesn't want anything to do with it, you have somebody who is a stakeholder who knows their tribal knowledge built this AI, and that person is gonna be your champion. They're gonna go into the organization and they're gonna tell their friends, look how much easier our job is gonna be. And if you don't do that, if you build what the CEO wants, it A, might not be the right thing to build, and it B, is not gonna get adopted because you scared people. Like, it really is. I mean, the news is terrifying about AI. Like, I read things every day and I'm just like, okay, A, that's not how that works. And B, like, we're not there. We're not at AGI. We're not a year away from AGI. We're quite a lot of work away from AGI, and even when we get there, we still got to figure out ways to get it adopted, or it's not going to do anything. So it have to be a person who makes a champion instead of makes somebody fearful.
And that actually leads into what does it mean to operationalize, and more importantly, how? This is what I think a lot of you guys want to understand. How do we take a problem, identify the right solution, and secret many solutions? It's a crawl, walk, run. Don't abandon your product nature. You don't start by running, you start by crawling. Sometimes you might get lucky and you might hop a little in between the crawl and the walk, and it gives you that false sense of reality that you can start to sprint. But Katie's just talking about pleasing your CEO. Yes, the highest paid person's opinion matters, but if you're not talking to the people whose job it is to push the button every day or to do that really manual thing, you're not going to build it correctly. And discovery, you guys know what we're talking about. Raise your hand. You know what discovery is? Okay. So you have to just spend time getting to know people. We're product people. We probably come from like psych and sociology degrees. Like, we're the people pleasers, the people. We want to get to know people. We want to get to know why they do the thing that they do. And that's the thing that you're supposed to tease out in discovery. If you're not going through discovery, even for your own company, for your own product, then it's going to be really hard to put this into production and know how to maintain it and evolve it. So you want to make sure that you're talking to the people, we'll call them the boots on the ground, the people who are living and breathing these actual processes and operating in them every single day. And you need to understand what excites them and what scares them. Get into the feelings. Ask them what they're worried about. Get them to talk about what Katie just said, because it's on their mind. They're worried about being replaced. Somebody that you are going to do discovery with in the near future is worried about their job being eliminated because AI is going to take it over. Have the conversation, help educate them. But now you can actually put that in your journey map for that end user. And you should be talking about the fears that they have, so that when you're talking to them and you're educating them on these cool new processes that they're going to want to adopt, you can address them. It shouldn't be a hidden secret. You should tackle it head on. So getting personal and maintaining logic will really help you guys get these types of solutions into production. That's what we mean by why do the right people matter. The right people, not the CEO, not the board of directors, the people doing the work.
Can I add on the right people?
Yeah.
So you all work with developers at some point, and I think there's this really scary thing that happens, because let me tell you the dirty secret about AI. If I'm building a machine learning model that's gonna predict something, it's gonna take old data and it's gonna predict something new in the future, it's one line of code. There's a whole bunch of code that happens before it and a whole bunch of code that happens after it, but the AI is one line. And it is this scary thing where software developer. Software developers by trade, I don't know if there's a lot of you in here, if there are, I'm very sorry. Software developers by trade think they can solve every problem because they know how to write code. They're like, I am an engineer, I can do anything. And so software developers figure out that they can write this one line of code, and then all of a sudden they're like, machine learning engineer. That is my new job title, thanks, I'll take the extra money. And you have this problem where at the end of the day, the thing that makes, what Ben might do an actual job and makes it hard isn't the ability to write that one extra line of code. I didn't go to school to learn to write one extra line of code. What it is the curiosity and the problem solving and how can I go and take a look at data and be curious about it. And I can tell if somebody's gonna be a good fit on my team if I give them a data set and the first thing they do is open it. If you don't open it and look at the data and put it in a visualization software like Tableau or Power BI or, go in Python and, Matplotlib, but if you don't go and you wanna look at the data and explore it, probably not gonna fit on your team. We've got great positions for software developers and I love them and, the whole concept of getting this into the cloud, that's all software development. If you look at a lot of the Gen AI solutions where you're literally just calling the OpenAI model, it's a software developer. But if you're looking for actual machine learning solutions, you can't just say, hey, I've learned that one line of code and now I know how to do this. Having the right people means having somebody who's done this and figured out, what are the right features to actually put in this model? And what's the way that I can measure whether or not this model works? There's this thing that happens to everybody that makes a regression or a classification model. So I'm answering a yes or no question, right? And I'll tell you mine because I don't care. I'll show you my embarrassing story. Mine was storage units. And it was whether or not somebody would move out of storage unit. So we had to predict, is somebody going to move out? Because if I can tell that, then I can go and I can offer pricing that reflects what my next month availability is going to be. I can price low when I have a lot of availability coming up. I can price high when that's not happening. It's a huge deal. And you go and you build this machine learning model that's a 1 or a 0, and I can make it and it is 99% accurate. Which sounds great, right? So 99% accuracy, it is right 99% of the time. Turns out people don't move out of their storage units but 1% a month. So if I just say nobody is ever going to move out of the storage unit, then I am 99% accurate out of the box. And that is solving exactly 0 business problems, but it's a really great math solution. And it's got a really great math number. So it's one of these things where you go and if you don't know how to do those things like measuring what is the accuracy, then the model is not going to succeed.
99% is an A+. The thing that I would add to this, because a big part of my job is to help create that adoption event. And one of the things that I've come to with this, how to get it into operation, how to get it into production, if the customer can put in their words why there is value in the solution as it exists today, then it's ready to go into production. If the customer cannot vocalize it themselves, don't put it in production. You're gonna spend a lot of money and you're gonna tear it down. And the reason why is because they're gonna come back to you week after week going, can you explain to me why this is valuable again? And they're not really gonna get it, but they're gonna just look at some number and have a lot of emotional reactions. And you're gonna wake up every morning afraid of that email and that emotion, right? And so what you need is you need the customer to be able to say it in their own words, what the value add is, and you need to be able to look at them and say, you're right. You don't have anything new to add. You don't have to reword it in your words because they didn't really fully understand you. If you can say you're right, then that customer is right. But what that means is they have to be able to clearly understand what one correct prediction means. Like, does that mean one less person who needed to look, who used to take 10 minutes to look, and now they don't have to do that? And so I saved 10 minutes because of that one successful prediction. If they can't say something like that, you're not ready.
Now add on to that, because you talked about what happens if they can articulate the value, we're ready to go to production. But I would say, only if they can answer the question, what happens when there's a mistake?
Yeah, so that's a very good one. So, one way that we talk about this a lot is false positives, right? So what happens is usually you have a model and the model's trying to predict an event. And the false positive, you have to understand what's worse, false positive or false negative. You really have to work that out on each individual problem. But that scenario of when I say this is true and it's not true, what does it mean? So sometimes we had a solution that was a maintenance style solution, that was a computer vision problem, and it fired every time it thought somebody needed to go look because there might be a defect on the assembly line. And like, okay, what's the pain there? Somebody goes and like looks, they waste a couple of minutes, something like that. But if the action taken from the false positive is it gets pulled from the line and is therefore brought back to the beginning and has to go through work again, then there's a much more painful cost associated with that. And if that cost is variable, and sometimes that cost is small, but sometimes on this rare event, when we predict incorrectly on this one class, it's an extremely large cost, you need to think about that large cost, not as a impossible event, but as an eventuality. And the reason why is because you're building the model small, and then people are going to love it, and then it's gonna get big. And when it gets big and it's being called 10,000 times a day, that means that rare event is now happening once a day. And now it's a big problem that you thought was small when you were only calling predict 5 times a day, and you might only see it once every 2 years.
And it might sound scary we're not used to, I know product people, we like to use some fluffy words and we like to make things sound positive. You can't with this. You actually have to ask when you're in your discovery, what happens if we're wrong? What happens if we make a mistake? What happens if we point the user in direction X when really we should have Y? How much does that cost our organization if this model were to be inaccurate? You have that transparent conversation, then you're not hiding anything. And you might have to ask that question 16 other different times, as well as it relates to each step of the process, whatever you're trying to automate, whatever you're trying to predict. But you have to know what happens if there is a mistake. It's not meant to doomsday, but if you don't have those conversations before you build the solution, you're more likely to fail. Because the moment there's one hiccup, everyone freaks out. And then they lose complete faith. But if you're setting the stage that there could be mistakes, and these are some of the things that could happen, what does it mean? Then you get to have what is our risk tolerance conversation? And that's what you really have to tease out of your executives or your board members. What is our risk tolerance? What are we willing to sacrifice? Maybe we don't need perfect accuracy for our business. Maybe that's okay, but where is that threshold of tolerance?
I think the one thing I would add on to that is I'm a numbers person. My whole background is math. Ben's whole background is math, and I hope that you would agree with me in this. Please don't ask for numbers. We go and we talk to people and they'll go, okay, I need it to be 95% correct. And I'm going, are you sure you need it to be 95% correct? Like, how much are you willing to automate? And then it's like, well, if you were willing to settle for 93%, I can automate twice as much. And they're like, yeah, 93 works. So it's one of those things where if you go into it with an idea of this is the number I want to achieve, and if I don't achieve that number, it's not going to work. People, it's when we first started getting product people, client services people, and they come in and they're like, tell me the number. I'm going, no, I'm not going to tell you the number. What we do is POC things first, and I can POC and I can figure out what's the estimate for that ROI, and what's, is there likely signal in that data. But when you go with sort of no knowledge ahead of time and say, I need it to be 95% accurate, that's a problem. It's a project that's going to fail. Like, to be quite honest, if you go in there with an exact number that you're expecting to hit, it's not going to work. Like, you've got the wrong expectations. It's resetting those expectations and saying, let's start this with a POC. Let's start this by saying, can we test it out? Can we figure out what this is gonna look like on a really small scale? And then, again, there are the issues with them saying when you go out to a larger scale, what does that mean? But testing it on that smaller scale is so important before you go and say that 95% number. It's always 95%, by the way. It's never anything but 95%.
One thing to add there that I've learned a few times over is unless you challenge assumptions, the assumption is that the humans that are doing it today are perfect, right? Unless you challenge that assumption, it will always exist. And every time we've challenged it, the answer that we learned is humans aren't perfect. And so it is very helpful when you're having a conversation with somebody and you're able to show them with data, hey, the humans who do this today are only right 93% of the time. When you can say that and everyone agrees to it, now there's this benchmark which says, hey, if we can outperform a human, then what? Whereas if you don't engage in that conversation to try and identify how often humans disagree with each other, the assumption is the human's 100% and your model is close, but not quite. And so then it's like, let's talk about where the model was wrong. And there's this much more healthy conversation, which is to talk about the frequency of the errors from the human and how the model has less of them. But it takes work to get there.
And do ask, what happens when humans make mistakes today? Because when you go and you ask an executive what your risk tolerance is, and that's the first question out of the gate, they have no tolerance for risk, obviously. But they will admit that humans are not perfect and that they do make mistakes today. So what happens? And get them to walk you through. And if the executive doesn't know, because they probably don't, go down to maybe the business unit manager, the department manager, the people who are managing the workers who might have those errors and understand what happens. Because then you can start to have a real conversation. It's not theoretical.
My challenge for all of you guys is to go get one of your voicemails and transcribe it. And then get someone else to listen to the voicemail and see how you did. Because people, that is a job people do. They sit and listen to phone calls and they transcribe them. And, we made models that replace what a person is doing. And you might think listening to a voicemail and writing down what was said in that voicemail is really easy, but try it. I promise you're not going to be 100% correct. You are going to shorthand something, you are going to change something. It happens every single time.
You guys are quiet. No more questions? All right.
I have a question. First of all, I really appreciate the insight y'all were giving about when you're trying to take something from a POC stage to actually development, challenging the client, so to speak, about what's their actual risk tolerance, what happens if we fail, how are you quantifying business outcome. That was super insightful. My question is, one of the key things I heard you all mention about maybe converting that to the actual dev phase and then post-adoption is end user buy-in, right? Stakeholder buy-in.
Yep.
What are some other key things aside from that in the adoption phase that you guys were highlighting? Because obviously making someone understand that their entire job function isn't being replaced, that's very important. I can understand that. But what are some other key things that y'all would highlight to say, this is how we're at adoption? There you go.
Thank you for the segue. So what we were hearing is, what are some of the other things that we really should focus on during the adoption strategy phase? So you build the thing, you get through POC, you build the real thing, you get it into production, and you need to get this adopted. So Ben and Katie can talk forever and a day over this. Katie's ready to go. I'll let you go.
I'm going to give you a lesson that I learned last week. And it is, what information are you showing people? I think even if I can get somebody on board that this model is great and it is doing everything they want, I am, again, I'm a numbers person. I want to see all of the data. I want to see all sorts of really great stuff about the data. And I'm going to build this dashboard that's got all the bells and whistles and it's got all the details in there. And you can go in and you can make your own decisions about it. And if the end goal of the project is that I am gonna give somebody information and they are gonna make a decision, and you do not steer them towards that decision, then it is not gonna do super well. We have a client and they are creatives. So everyone there is creative. We're not talking about technical people, we are talking about creative people that have been slowly tricked into management. And they now have to make a decision based on something I gave them in a dashboard. And taking this person who's an artist and saying, here's a ton of information, go make the decision. I've given you all that you need. That's not gonna work. It's figuring out with the end user, it's really that sort of UX at the end of it. What does the end user feel? Like what is the way that they are gonna consume this information? Because I can show them the dashboard, and when I'm sat there holding their hand and walking them through it and going, look at this amazing feature, and then look, if I click here, it's gonna do that. That's great, but then tomorrow when they're trying to do it by themselves, if they can't get the decision intuitively, they're not gonna use it. It's, figuring out what is the way that that output gets implemented into the system. So going beyond, I made a model and here I delivered the data, and figuring out what is the best way to deliver that data is something that really has to be taken into account, or that's gonna really skirt your adoption as well.
And the end user matters. When Katie's talking about the person that's gonna look at that dashboard, we're referring to these dashboards as your model health dashboards. You can't just release something into the wild and then not have any idea how it's performing. Your end user wants to know how it's performing, but what is their persona? What is it that they care about? Are they over 6 departments and they have a ton of information that they constantly push them every day? But you know what that means? You need to know their job. You need to know how they make decisions, what data they rely on every single day to make decisions. If you don't get into their psyche and understand how they're operating on a day-to-day basis, you can make all the pretty dashboards to showcase how awesome your model's performing. It won't land until you can really think like that particular end user and how they need specific data to consume and make a right decision.
Another thing I would suggest is whenever at all possible, release in phases. So just as a generic statement, if I had a model and the model was trying to predict the color of something, red, blue, green, orange, whatever, and I knew that I could create value by predicting the color, and I knew that the most common color was red. If I was ready to go ahead and productionalize that model and make use out of it, it might be useful to just say, hey, what happens if we automate the times we predict red? Because that's the one that happens the most and that's the one that's the most confident. And then we'll worry about those other colors later. It might seem stupid being that you have a model that predicts all the colors, but the thing is, when you productionalize that model, when you make use of it, you're gonna find all these weird issues, all these bugs, all these topics. And when people find a reason to hate a machine learning model, they love it. They're just big into hating that model. And so if you can keep it small and traceable, if you can clean up the messes in red before you move to green, before you move to yellow, what you'll find is that by cleaning up all the messes in red, when I open up green, there's only a handful of messes. Because green had some of those red messes too that got cleaned up, but no one ever saw it. Because I cleaned it when I was messing with red. And by putting them out in those phases, there's not this moment when somebody is looking at a sea of data that is riddled with random errors. And when somebody sees a sea of data riddled with random errors, they want to emotionally throw in the towel. It happens all the time. They want to say, this is too much. We can just go back to that comfortable place where we were last week, where I didn't have to worry about your numbers. And that fear is terrible. And so as long as you can make the case, hey, if we automated only red, we would have ROI. We have ROI, which is what you need to show if we automate red. And let's get red working real well and then move to green. And if your customer can go on that journey with you, what you'll find is by the time you move out of red and green and into yellow, they're the advocate. They want to say, hey guys, this is what yellow is going to look like. We're first going to have this, then we're going to clean this up. and they're part of that expertise now. But if they just get hit with a sea of issues, you're gonna spend months just trying to justify yourself. And you're gonna end up in the same place, probably with just a little bit more QA headaches.
And we'll go back to, embarrassing stories from Katie's past. I have just graduated from UNF, I've got my stats degree, and it was one of our first clients, and they were a trading company. And we're talking bros. So they're in New Jersey. They are working out of a renovated high school gym. So they've got half desks, half basketball, and there's a weight room upstairs. These are bros. And they are like, it's a job that I can't imagine how people do, because you'll be like, yeah, I lost 300 grand. They like, whatever, I'll make it back tomorrow. I'd be jumping off a roof. I don't know how they do it. But you're talking to these people, and I'm really excited because we've got a cool thing that we can show them. We found that we can find their trades, and we can take the edges of their trades where they weren't gonna trade something, and we can automate those. So we can predict based on the likelihood that their trade is successful. Can we take those shoulders of what they were, essentially betting on, and can we go and make those little edge bets? And it's gonna make a ton of money. And I'm really excited to go and talk to this guy about how we're about to make him a ton of money. And I say, I'm terrified of speaking at this point. Just FYI, when I started NLP, my agreement was I would work there. They never made me speak to anybody. I wanted to sit in the corner and just have my numbers, and they're like, no, you're gonna go talk to this bro. So I'm talking to this bro, and I'm like, oh, well, we did this, and because we were making multiple comparisons, I used the Bonferroni correction. And I'm gonna swear here, so I'm sorry to the stream. But the guy looks at me and goes, you didn't use Bonferroni, did you? And I said, yeah, why? What's wrong? And he goes, oh, because I couldn't give a shit. And I was like, wow, lesson learned though. At the end of the day, the thing that's really important here is storytelling, that adoption piece. If I can't tell it as a story, if I go and say, here are my numbers, I'm really nerdy, and this is the answer, and trust me, it's great, look at the math, it's wonderful. That is not going to get somebody to adopt your product. You have to be able to go and tell it as a story. You have to show, here's all the tragedy that we encountered on the way up, and you have to tell it. And somebody that we did a storytelling class with, they said something that I think is probably one of those pivotal things for me. You're not the hero. Your client is the hero. Every saga has a hero, and there's a guide, and we are the guide. If you go and you tell somebody their story and you make them the hero, they are going to be so excited about it. But if you go and go, I have saved your company, they're going to be like, yeah, whatever. So it really is learning the way that you can communicate with somebody, and communicating those final results is super, super important.
And to add on to that, within an adoption strategy, you have to predict the future. I promise you, and I know that sounds maybe a little bit harder, but if you get into the rhythm of delivering AI solutions to production, you live through one experience, I promise you will never forget it, and you will never forget what you learned from it, but you're also never gonna forget the sheer panic and anxiety that is running throughout your organization if you delivered it for your company or for your client's organization. It is going to happen. Nothing ever gets delivered to production. I don't even care if it's app dev and no one freaks out. It just will happen, but you need to predict what they're going to freak out over. And Ben hit the nail on the head. I forget what specifically you were talking about, but it was around, you need to be able to figure the red out and figure out all the data within the red before you go to the green, the yellow, the orange, right? Data discrepancies make people freak out and they lose faith and they lose trust. Product people, that's all you have to say. Within your adoption strategy, this is going to be a very feelings-friendly document. You need to tell your end users, the people who are adopting this solution, what they are going to feel, when certain things are going to make them ring an alarm bell, when they're going to start to feel anxious. We just launched the client's first AI solution in production a few months ago. We wrote, I don't think it was more than 6 or 7 pages. It was an adoption and implementation strategy document. Anybody could read this.
nothing technical, but it predicted their pattern of behavior as we incrementally went from red to yellow to orange to green. And then they forgot about it on day one and they freaked out. And we reminded them, you're supposed to freak out. We are in this together and this is what you're gonna feel like tomorrow. And this is what you're gonna feel like a week from now. And now we're a couple months in and now we're starting to build that advocate. Now they're starting to go, oh, I know what's gonna happen next. And so the person that's sitting next to them and they're freaking out because they're seeing, oh, we're in the orange now, this is happening again, oh my God, we can't trust this. No, it's fine. We're not the ones saying, no, it's fine. Our client is saying that to their coworker, going, no, we've lived through this. Just listen, just trust. We know we're gonna see data discrepancies. That's why we're in this extended hypercare period, to really clean up the inaccuracies and to carry this coverage of automation across the bigger swath. So you become a therapist. And I think if you're in product, you damn well know you become a therapist, but you have to predict when your executives or when your clients are gonna have those freak out moments and find a really nice way to put it into an adoption strategy document. All right, that's the next thing we got. Oh, yeah, Katie started talking about this already. We hit a little bit on technologies, the cool tools. And then we've got some questions. We saw generative AI, classic AI, and we can get to those. I want you guys to speak up. And Katie went into a little bit of the engineering versus scientific. Ben, I'm gonna pick on you, and you might not remember the last time we did this. But you talked about the difference between solving a problem with code versus solving a problem in a scientific approach, and why this is important and why are they fundamentally different?
Yeah, so I think I remember the way I explained it last time. I'm gonna say it a completely different way this time. So the thing that Katie and I tend to do a whole lot in the work that we do is we start by understanding the problem that somebody's encountering, and then we understand what data we can collect around that problem. And then we shape that data into a number of examples that we call a case table that like reproduce that problem we're trying to solve. And then we understand what are the possible experiments that we can run, that we can measure against that data set to understand how well the solution that we're designing is gonna apply to this problem. And alternatively, there is a engineering mindset that frequently happens, which is there's a problem, I know there's this technology that solves that problem, and they have an API. So let me hook up to it, right? And one of the examples that I thought was very interesting to me was when the product Whisper came out. It was the audio transcription software, and everybody was like, oh, let's just go use Whisper. And I challenged the assumption, hey, what was the actual problem? And the problem was that this customer needed to have a 60-second audio file transcribed perfectly. And Whisper claims to be 92% accurate, which means in your 60-second audio, there's maybe 6 word errors that are gonna happen. And the prior solution had 20 word errors, Whisper has 6, still not good enough. So getting some new technology and plugging it in is not gonna solve your problem, but you're not gonna realize that unless you create the cases, the examples to look at and see, hey, out of these 100 examples, 0 of them actually passed what I wanted them to. And we ended up coming up with a solution that was experimental, and we were able to test it and worked quite well, and we're currently automating 70% of the examples. But to get to that solution, step 1 was like, stop throwing out your buzzwords. Don't tell me Whisper's great. Don't tell me about the new API that Azure has that does all this stuff for free. And give me an example set that I can measure some stuff against. Because if I can measure some stuff against, then I can start testing your theories. And I think that's the difference between having a scientific approach and an engineering approach.
Can I ask for some grace from our product friends? part of what we're saying in that scientific approach, all you guys made that trifold poster board, right, in 3rd grade where you did an experiment and you have to use the scientific method. And it meant I'm gonna make a hypothesis and I'm gonna test it. Where there's a lot of headbutting that happens between particularly my team and Ben's team and the product team, because our team does the POCs, is, hey, can you make tickets for that? No, I cannot make a work breakdown structure that says exactly how long it's gonna take an experiment to happen. Because I don't know what's gonna happen. At the end of the day, I'm building a time machine. I can't test it until I have a time machine. I can't get halfway and go, oh, well, I can go back 2 days. I'm building an entire new thing that we've never done before. I don't know if it's gonna work. So what we've tried to do is sort of go with this, a little bit of a data-driven Scrum approach where, we love Agile. I'm not anti-Agile, and our Scrum Masters at work will tell you that that is absolutely not true. And it's because I can't function in tickets with, really, really detailed things of this is exactly what we're gonna do. The Scrum Master's going, hey, can you please put detail in your ticket? And I said, the ticket says what I'm gonna do. It says experiment on this thing. And he's going, well, what are you gonna do? And I'm like, experiment on this thing. What are you asking me? Like, stop asking for details. Again, don't ask me for numbers, don't ask me for details. But what we have to do is figure out a way to work together. And that is really saying, okay, I'm gonna experiment, but I'm gonna time box it to 10 hours. I'm gonna figure out a way that we can do this where we get to have a little bit of flexibility where I can't define exactly the steps that we're gonna take. I can't make a user story for an experiment, but what I can do is say, I'm gonna time box it to 10 hours. Sometimes it might take me 2 and sometimes it might take me 12. And I hope it's a lot more the 2s than the 12s, but we're gonna run into cases where we have to say, oh, we gotta make another experiment ticket, or we gotta expand this one. But there has to be some grace on both sides where AI doesn't fit super well into Agile, but you can make it work.
Yeah, Katie's 100% right. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. It's not them being technical people and just being a diva, I promise you. When they say they need time to experiment, it's for your betterment of the solution. And it's just planning. Katie, is this a 10-hour? I think I want to play around with this, or is this a 20-hour? Are we fitting this into I'm going to have an answer in 1 week, or are we fitting this into, Jen, I'll give you an answer in 2 weeks? That's all you get to know. And then trust the process, because they're going to come back with so much more information than you ever anticipated, and are probably going to know how to solve the problem. And then you can get into the actual, how are we going to break out this work? How many people do we need? Where do the software engineers fit? Where do we need a data analyst? So just allow the experimentation to happen and just try to plan with time boxing things. We have one more slide. Is the juice worth the squeeze? I'll sum it up because I believe we're taking questions next, or wrapping.
5 minutes questions.
Okay. So what this slide is really meant to cover is everything that you just heard. If you are doing discovery, you're experimenting, you are conducting the right POCs, you're understanding what data you're working with, what data you have available, what data you don't have. Do you need labeled data? How clean is your data? How much is this gonna cost you to go buy data if you need to buy data for training purposes? You have to know all of those things and the answers and the outputs of your discovery, the answers and the outputs of your hypotheses that you were proving with POCs. And you have to know the state of your data to know that, are your expectations realistic? And is there true ROI there? And sometimes after you spend 12 weeks doing all of that, you have to walk away. That's the whole point. You spend maybe 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, figuring all of that out to save yourself millions of dollars in mistakes after it gets to production and it's a big flop. You wanna round that out?
Yeah, I'll be a little quick about it, but I would just say that when you get to that point at the end where you're deciding if the juice is worth the squeeze, if you feel yourself turning into a salesperson, then stop, and the juice is not worth the squeeze. If you think it's ambiguous, maybe it is, maybe it's not, stop, it's not worth the squeeze. It only move forward on these things if you're confident, because in the end, the development process is going to cost 50% more than you think it's going to cost. The adoption process is going to take 90 days more than you think it's going to take, and you don't want to have to keep justifying yourself. So if you don't think it is, it's probably not.
All right,
Questions?
questions? We could not have possibly answered everything. Martin?
Can you hear me from there?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. English is not my native speaking language, so be patient with me. I'm just doing my best. I think we as product managers started with AI, asking ChatGPT to write PRDs, right? For us. Then we gained the hate of the UX community because we started building prototypes with Dev Zero and all that stuff. Now, because of marketing or popularity, there's a lot of no-code tools that allow you to plug a lot of APIs, vector database, create your embeddings, and build a case for AI. And any of us can do that.
Right, exactly.
What would you suggest us? You have the opportunity to plant a seed on almost 80 people, right? From your experience, and what are the risks for us for doing that kind of stuff?
Bravo.
So hopefully this doesn't sound bad. I've never given this answer before, but Katie and I both have degrees in statistics. We've been building more simple models for 15, 30 years, whatever. And you can pour data into a linear model and train a linear model without having any clue what you're doing. They created these no-code solutions that allow people to do that 7 or 8 years ago, where you just sort of put your data set in and tell it what you're trying to predict, and it builds the thing for you. And that didn't come for our jobs or anything like that. And then a lot of people used it in order to get one step in and then run into some walls to call us to have us come build their solution for them, and that will continue happening. So the way that I would say that is to properly create a vector database that actually does a good job of retrieving the documents that you're interested in is really hard. And to build a vector database that has your documents in it and returns something that makes you smile is incredibly easy. There's a wide range between those two things that a lot of that relates to understanding the business use case and how to structure that into the data. And then some of that comes from knowledge from Udemy courses and stuff. So what I would say is, just because numbers come out the other end doesn't mean it's good. There's a lot of difference between good and great, and it shouldn't be a deterrent. You should very much be using these things because the barrier to entry is getting smaller and smaller, and it's great.
So if you look at math teaching, they did a study with kids and calculators. And if you give a kid who knows what they're doing in math, a calculator, they do better on the tests. Honestly, if you put a calculator on a kid's desk when they're taking a history test, they actually do better. It's this little like confidence boost. But if the kid doesn't understand the math in the first place, the calculator doesn't help. What I would say, is probably worth knowing. Would I ever go to production with something I built in a no-code solution? Absolutely not. I wouldn't do it. Would I prototype something? Would I go and test something? 100%. So if you were a product manager and you're like, man, I've got this idea, and you want to go to somebody and say, hey, I built this prototype, and look, it looks cool. Can we make this in production? Would this work? That is awesome. Like, I'm not trying to gatekeep AI in any way, shape, or form, but I think it is these no-code things are a really good starting place, and they're a really good way to have, I go to our UX folks and I'll be like, hey, I drew this really ugly picture, can you fix it? And it never looks like the picture I drew. Maybe it just says something about my UX skills, but it has like that flavor. They've been able to explain my ideas by saying, here's a picture. And it's a whole lot easier to show a picture and say, can we make something kind of like this than it is to say, can you make something that answers all of these requirements? And I think if you're a product manager and you are technically inclined and you want to get in there and try that no-code stuff, that is awesome. But I wouldn't, don't take the cheap victory and go, oh yeah, look, it works for my 2 cases, so put this baby in production, ship it. Like, we want to go and say, you know, hey, we've made this thing, it looks cool, let's do more of that.
Time for one more?
I have a quick question. So with Gen AI being all the rage right now, what you guys are providing, I would say a slightly different perspective on that. Are there places where Gen AI belongs in a production solution, or is it usually outperformed by, let's say, pre-Gen AI solutions?
There are totally places where it belongs in the solution, and the way that I sort of differentiate it, I think Gen AI is fantastic for B2C. For B2B, it can be a little bit of a struggle. When we talk about things like, you know, I'm trying to process 1 million documents, that 1,700 times faster is really important. When I'm asking a human to wait 4 seconds for an answer, probably not that big of a deal. You know, I think there's cases where, like, I'll go back to that case where we're looking at resumes. How many of you guys have read a terrible job description before? Like, every job description is really bad. Like these, you know, hey, can you find me a candidate? I need a developer, knows Python. That's like what you get if you're a recruiter, and it's like, go figure this out. I'm using Gen AI to say, make this better. Make a job description that makes sense. That is awesome. And there's definitely like production things, but it's a human interacting with that. And I think that's where I've seen the best success of Gen AI sort of incorporating into that pipeline.
Regular human interaction when the output is creativity. As long as you have that, like Gen AI is the way to do things. What I would say is that I have at least one LLM up on my screen when I'm coding all day long. Whenever I'm writing a PowerPoint, I have generative AI up helping me write my PowerPoint. Those things are absolutely wonderful use cases for it. If ever you want to automate or limit the human interaction, that is not a good place at the moment.
And I'm gonna, before we wrap up, can I ask for one favor that is gonna make Ben hate me?
Yes.
Can we get a selfie?
Yeah. Of course.
We got an awesome
Before we
group.
do that, can we give them a big round of applause? On April Fool's Live, I did not tell them that they really know what they're talking about. Right? Real stuff. So good.
You're gonna have to come up.
All right, selfie time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can we get that?
So you gotta go on the side. Curtis, we gotta get you in there.
All right.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, y'all. Congrats.
Thank you.